Hello, and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I discuss providing feedback to your supervisors, not an easy task. We catch up with Caryn Brookman, principal and owner of Blackwater Environmental Group, about running a small business, managing challenging projects, and her secret love of the Grateful Dead. And finally, the smallest bird egg is the size of a pea and weighs less than a grain of rice. It belongs to the bee hummingbird, which is also the lightest bird, weighing the same as a penny. And for all of you under a certain age, pennies were a form of currency that was widely used to purchase goods once upon a time. If you do find one of these little copper gems, supposedly you might have some good luck.
Yeah. Well, you can't find them anymore. So
hit that music.
This episode is sponsored by Blackwater Environmental Group. Blackwater Environmental Group, a certified minority and disadvantaged business, has over 20 years of experience working with private sector firms and government agencies, especially in the transportation industry, managing environmental programs, interpreting environmental policy, and developing unique solutions to project coordination and environmental documentation tasks. In addition to their project management and NEPA capabilities, the professional staff of planners are committed to utilizing asset management tools, performance measurements, and report methods to help their clients assess and adapt to changing climate and extreme weather conditions that impact transportation needs. With everything they do, Blackwater strives to remember the original intent of national environmental policy, environmental protection, conservation, and enhancement, and seeks innovative ways to streamline the ever-changing regulatory process. Check them out at blackwaterinvironmentalgroup.com. NAEP is always looking for volunteers. We have lots of committees for engagement, whether it's our NEPA, biology, or coastal resources working groups, or our official committee groups. We'd love to have your support. Not sure about who needs help? Just ask. Also, I know for sure that we at EPR are looking for a volunteer to help us create content for the show. Please let us know you're interested at environmentalprofessionalsradio.com. Let's get to our segment. Laura, I thought of you this week. I actually had one of my coworkers ask me a great question, and I immediately thought of you. So she asked me, how do I provide feedback to supervisors? And I thought it was an amazing question. It's a really, really good question, but she actually also presented it in two parts. One internally, right? So like to, a boss or a manager, project manager, and then two externally to a client, which I think are two different things.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really good, interesting topic. And I was like, I know who will have the answer. Let's ask Laura. So what do you think?
I think those are great questions and super timely. My book club, the High Impact Reading Challenge, we just finished reading Radical Candor by Kim Scott, and she has worked for Google and Apple and all those big role model companies. And so she has lots of great feedback, and there is a section on giving feedback to your bosses. So I highly recommend reading that book for anybody at the top, especially for managers and supervisors, but also for the people who are working for other people, because it is super challenging. But in her case, I'm super curious about the details. What exactly is it that she wants to give feedback on? But you're in a tough spot because it really depends on your relationship with your managers or boss or supervisor, whatever it is, and what the expectations have been set. If you have a boss who's do what I tell you and doesn't ever ask you for feedback, you're in a tough position. And if you've just started this job, you're even in a tougher position. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of do some exploring the field and seeing okay, what position am I in? Do I have any authority or leeway leverage, or even just the relationship to say something? And then, with giving any feedback, if it's not solicited, you have to ask for permission to give the feedback. And so what Kim Scott recommends is asking for that permission, and sort of, you don't want to hit them with something big right off the bat. You're not going to tell them I think you're sucking at your job.
You're the worst. Yeah.
Take that.
Yeah.
But if you can try to see how receptive are they to some smaller feedback. And if it goes well, then, you can kind of start building that relationship. But again, it depends on if you're a field technician and you want to give feedback to your boss that maybe you don't see very often. it's honestly, so all you bosses and managers out there listening, it's really on you to open that door and not open the door artificially, because it's been my experience that a lot of people will say, oh, I have open door policy. And that door is not open.
Yeah.
I have an open door policy until I slam it on your foot,
Yeah. And I think there's maybe the reaction is always the scary part, right? Like you're always really worried about how they're going to react. And I guess, is it something that even understanding that, getting to that point where you see what the reaction is, does that tell you something as well about the person that's managing you?
Oh, for sure. If you try to give feedback and they're not receptive, or it's my way or the highway, you've got to do some self-reflection. Is this the environment I want to work in? If you feel like your boss isn't going to change, if I come to you, Nick, and I'm like, I really don't like the way you talked to me the other day, or I felt like you called me out in front of a whole team of other people and that made me feel bad, and you don't care.
Yeah.
You need to go find another job where somebody cares about you.
100%. Yeah.
And that's totally what this book is about caring about someone and giving direct feedback. Yeah. And you cannot give direct feedback without caring for somebody first, because then it's not genuine. And so if you want to create a culture where people are giving, because it is all about culture, right? If you don't have a culture where people are comfortable giving each other feedback, and that rolls down to the whole role model way. And if my boss is willing to accept feedback, then maybe we can build a team that gives feedback to each other. But if our boss doesn't accept and give good feedback, then we're going to be a team of people who also don't give each other good feedback. And so it always starts with the leader. So does that answer any parts of your question?
Yeah, no, I really do think it does. And it really sparks a lot of really fun, questions and comments. And the fear of asking in the first place, I think, is something that immediately comes to mind if you're younger. And you're like, okay, how on earth are we going to do this? I even remember, not even feedback wise, but when I wanted to transfer down to North Carolina, I was terrified for like a full week to ask my boss. And I finally sat down and asked him. He's like, I was wondering when you were going to ask me that. It was just like, he knew. He's like, I got married and, my wife's in a different state and I would like to live with her. And he's like, yeah, it's not a problem. So there's all this huge weight that I had put on myself was immediately lifted off. And if I had talked to him 3 days earlier, guess what? It would have been, I wouldn't have had to struggle, Exactly.
And I think that's a good point. And something I wish in hindsight I had been better of, because yes, it's risky. It's kind of, you hang out in the space of what I don't, not facing the fear and not knowing what you don't know is better than knowing, So if I know, yes, my boss isn't going to change, the situation is going to change, that means I have to do something.
Right.
And so a lot of people go on the side of like, well, I'm just going to deal with it, suck it up, live with the stress. And then that's just not going to end well, because another thing will come up. So I think the best thing is if you do have, well, first of all, if you don't have regular feedback with your boss, that is the first thing I would request. I don't care if you're having a problem with them right now or not.
Right.
Even if things are rosy golden, I would say, hey, can we, every other month have a 10-minute, 15-minute check-in, forget the annual reviews. I mean, if you have that, that's great. That's another time when you can use it. They're giving you feedback. They should at the same time be asking for feedback of them. I always did that. I would give my feedback, but then say, what can I do to help you do your job better? And I still do that. I do that every 2 weeks with the employees that I have now, because if they can't do their job, that's not their fault. That's my fault.
Right. Yeah. You're totally
if
right.
they're not happy in their job, that's my fault,
Yeah.
And that's part of caring. And so I don't know if you want to stop there, if you want to tackle the client question.
The client side of things is a different beast. And I've seen lots of good ways of handling it and lots of bad ways of handling it. And so I would love your perspective here too, though, because it is different. Like, it is not the same as walking into your boss's office and sitting down and having a conversation. So I don't know if you can talk, maybe some of those differences are, what the approach, how different it is. I don't want it to make it seem like it's night and day, but it is different.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of similarities. I think you still have to care. At the end of the day, you're doing a job and your client has a job, and you have to figure out where we both have the same goal in mind. So I care about you and the work that you do. And then hopefully when you've hired people or accepted work, you're considering those things. And so setting expectations too, you don't want to start with a client and then hit them with feedback that they didn't know was coming. So if they know from the beginning, when you start your relationship, that feedback is part of what we do, and reciprocating that. I'm going to tell you if I'm unhappy with something, and you're going to tell me if you're unhappy with something, and we're not going to let it fester. And so always setting expectations up front is the best thing that you can do, because people get upset when they get hit with something from left field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on my side of things too, sometimes it's, so say like, if it's a junior staff has an issue with a client, they want to provide feedback and they just go talk to the client. That's maybe not necessarily the best approach immediately. In my mind, it's probably better to talk through that with if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, it's like, hey, this is the issue I'm having. I would like, some thoughts and ideas, feedback on how to address this issue. So I think there's some perspective there that you're going to get that you might not have otherwise when you're younger sometimes. Because I think one of the things that's very important to realize here too is that everybody's different. You cannot treat people the same way. Even two different clients, you can't say this is exactly how we do it all the time. And so maybe your boss has a better understanding of the person you're dealing with than you do. And that's another way you can get different feedback before you go and talk to the client. Some bosses may say, hey, I'll take care of it. Some bosses may say, that's okay. You're very welcome to do so. I want to sit in on the call too, just in case. I guess in both instances, really, you can go to other people to get some advice on how you could go forward. Is that something worth pursuing?
Yeah, definitely. It's never a bad idea to bounce ideas off someone before you hit send on an email, especially.
Yeah.
And it may be a better, it depends too. It's good sometimes you want to do it in email so you have documentation, but other times it's better to pick up the phone. But you've got to intentionally choose which of those options you're going to do. And again, it depends on your relationship with that client.
Yeah.
Which is the best avenue. I will say on our book club call, there was somebody who had talked about a specific instance where a client had given them feedback and said, there were some spelling errors and some things like the work that you do for us reflects on us. So I'm just putting this out there to you that if this continues, you will no longer be hearing from us,
Yeah.
And that kind of feedback hurts. But at the same time, it was better for them to correct the issue and maintain the relationship. And then what I loved about Radical Candor, the book, is that you really have to be radically candid with yourself and honest about your strengths and weaknesses and what you're providing. But the only way that had happened was that they set the expectation at the beginning with that client and said, I'm going to give you feedback and you give me feedback as soon as as soon as it happens, I want to hear about it. Mm-hmm. And if that relationship hadn't been established at the beginning, they more than likely would have just disappeared,
Right. Yeah. And then they'd be asking, why didn't we get our next contract? And it's like, oh, well, you had spelling errors the first month that you were here and they never got corrected. It's like, you didn't tell us. And they'll be like, well, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Oh gosh, we could probably spend, another 20 minutes talking about it, but we'll sit it for now. We can always come back to it and maybe get to our interview.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Caryn Brookman. She's the principal and owner of Blackwater Environmental Group. Welcome, Caryn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we're super excited to have you. Fred Wagner recommended you to us and had just so much to say and was like, have you contacted her yet? Have you contacted her yet? Have you contacted her yet?
Right,
it's like, we're working on it. We'll get her here. So Here you go, Fred. She's finally here. But if you wanted to start off by telling us so you own this company. Tell us what Blackwater Environmental Group does.
I do own it. So we started it's going on 13 years now, which is hard to believe. In some respects, it feels like yesterday, and in some respects, it feels like a really long time. So Blackwater Environmental Group, we focus on NEPA analysis and documentation. At least that was our main focus when we first started. We've since grown and expanded our capabilities. And just recently, actually, we've broadened our capabilities into planning. So now we're doing climate change, resiliency, and sustainability work. But my heart is really NEPA. I'm a NEPA nerd. And so that's how we started. And that's kind of the root of it. And I would say most of our staff are also NEPA nerds. So
that's awesome. Well, you're in good company. I am absolutely a NEPA nerd. And I'm trying to convert Laura here. But
just a habitat nerd.
Yeah, right. But how do you have the courage to go out on your own and get a company for yourself?
Well, it's kind of funny. I think a little bit of it was ignorance because, and I think this is so true with a lot of small business owners, is that we're practitioners, most of us, right? No matter what the field, we've been practicing in whatever that field is. And we don't have MBAs. We're not business folks. Right. And we kind of just get into it, right? Because we have a passion for what we do. And that's really what happened with me. So I worked for the government for a number of years before I started the company. I started a family and I thought, this is my chance to get out and do different work. I wanted to not just be stuck in one thing. I wanted to have different clients. I wanted to have work on diverse projects. And so that's really why I started it. And again, a little bit of it was ignorance. I thought, well, I'll just get in. I mean, I can just work like I've always been working.
Right.
And, I have to say it's much different. And quite often I get asked by other women, especially, I would love to start my own company because I have a family, and I think it would be great to be able to have my own company where I don't have to clock in and clock out. And I say to them, in all honesty, not how it works.
Right.
So before you make that leap, just understand that, it's not a clock in, clock out. You're constantly working.
Yeah. There's no out. Yeah.
Yeah. You're just permanently clocked in.
Right. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how big is your company now? How many employees do you have?
We just hit 15. And we've grown quite a bit over a short period of time. So I mentioned that we're hitting 13 years this January. And the growth was a little bit slow. Of course, I started my company during a recession. Mm-hmm. Not the best time to start a company. So it took us a little while to get off the ground. But once we took hold, just the last 3 years, we just keep expanding and adding more staff. So it's been great. And I feel very blessed for sure.
Great. So I imagine that you also have had to learn a lot about leadership taking on this role. So what have you learned? What kind of advice do you have to give in that area?
Yeah, it's been like trial by fire, right? Bam, You're a leader now. You need to figure it out. So I think most of it it's just been kind of learning on the job, right? And that is probably, I think, one of the hardest parts of owning my own business, because prior to that, I had not been a manager or a supervisor. And so I've had to work up to the point where I've had to hone in on some of my leadership skills and really get the confidence to lead a team. It's been difficult. I question myself often. I think most small business owners question themselves and question their decisions. Am I doing what's best for the company, what's best for the staff, what's best for me? So I think that's a hard part. And I'm quite sure most small business owners and leaders sort of question that. And I have to say, I think a big benefit of being a small business owner is that you kind of find a cohort or a group of other small business women owners, and you kind of stick together and you lean on each other. And I have wonderful colleagues that I just don't know what I would do without, because we use each other as sounding boards, and I absolutely need that. So,
that's great.
Yeah, that really is fantastic. And you talk about your growth here, and you're now leading the largest environmental study in Maryland's history, which is also one of the governor's priority transportation projects. And it's under the Executive Order 13807. We're definitely going to get into the logistics of the project, but I was kind of hoping you could tell us a little bit about, okay, so what is 13807?
So 13807 is considered the one federal decision executive order. It has since been rescinded. So it was a Trump administration executive order. When the Biden administration came on board, it was immediately rescinded. Mm-hmm. However, the study was under that executive order for a solid 2.5 years. And with that, we had an accelerated schedule. We still do, but there was much more pressure at that point to continue on an accelerated path.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So has that changed with the switch in the administration?
What has changed by rescinding the executive order is not that we have slowed down on the schedule, but other federal agencies, such as, National Park Service, Army Corps of Engineers, that were also under the executive order, are no longer. And so there's not as much pressure, I think, for our federal partners to make decisions quickly. And we have wonderful federal partners, but without that executive order, it definitely did change with our federal partners.
Gotcha. Yeah. So break down the study for us. So what is the project? What made it a top priority for you? And, maybe tell us a little bit about how did you win it?
Well, I think I'll start with the latter. So I have worked with the Maryland Department of Transportation. I really started my career. Matter of fact, I interned with them in college. And so I've had a very long relationship with MDOT. and I've been under many contracts with them. And so that's sort of how it started. I was just, I think, in the right place at the right time, and I had an established relationship with this agency. And so I was asked to to take on the oversight of the environmental study. And then they hired GEC, and I was asked to be part of that. And so that's what I continue working under in this leadership role. I feel blessed to have this opportunity. It is unusual, I think, for a small business to take on a leadership role like this, especially under a GEC with large corporations. So I definitely feel blessed. It has been challenging nonetheless. I have a growing company, and in some respects, I feel like that's a part-time job compared to overseeing a mega project. So that's very difficult. But for my wonderful staff, but there's no way I could do it. This project has been in the works for decades. Maryland has been studying doing something on the Capitol Beltway, which, by the way, Yahoo just came out, I think, last week. I don't know if you saw it, but we have the second worst traffic in the country.
Yeah.
Just,
really?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Just reaffirmed.
That's, yeah, exactly.
Just below California. And the Capitol Beltway is the worst. So this project is widening two interstates. As if one wasn't enough, it's two. So it's I-495, which is the Capitol Beltway. It goes around Washington, D.C., and there's a spur that goes north. It's I-270. Initially, it was widening of 48 miles by 2 lanes, and they're high occupancy toll lanes, which is also relatively new in Maryland. We do have some toll lanes, but not a lot. Certainly not like our southern state, Virginia, has many toll roads. But we have now pared down the improvements, and they're about 14 miles now, which is funny. That's considered pared down. I mean, that's in and of itself a major project.
Yeah, right. Of course.
So that's where we are. We just put out a supplemental document Friday.
Can you kind of walk through what led to the pared down? Was it during this process where you got the comments back?
Yeah, it was. We did. The preferred alternative was not identified in the draft environmental impact statement. And so based on the comments we got back on the DEIS and a tremendous amount of stakeholder engagement, feedback from elected officials, our partner agencies, we realized that we really needed to take a look at, what could be done in this area. There were displacements, there were major environmental impacts associated with part of the 48 miles. And so we did pare it down. Now, in addition to the environmental study, we are working concurrently with a P3, so we're working with a developer, and they had defined one phase of the project. And so we paired our preferred alternative to more closely align with the delivery approach for the entire program. So it's 15 miles with replacement of a major structure over the Potomac River as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like you said, that's still pretty incredible. It's a huge, huge undertaking for sure. So we were talking about the project itself. You mentioned a little bit about how you won the project. And you've also mentioned being a small business working with large businesses. So when your small business gets a project this large, how does that affect the rest of what you do? Were there other projects that had to go? Did you have to hire a bunch of staff? Do you have to reorganize how you were doing other projects? Can you kind of walk us through that? Yeah,
that's a great question. And absolutely, when you're working on a major project like this, whether you're a small business owner or not, you're in it. It's not a plug in, plug out situation, right? You have to plug in and you're fully in. And so that really did require me to have to take a look at the resources that I had and kind of juggle and manage those resources and add resources. And so I did completely reorganize the company. We hired more people. Matter of fact, we doubled in staff since the beginning of the study. And it was necessary. And I also needed to add more administrative staff. Because as a small business owner, you're really required to do everything. You're the financial manager, you're administrative, you're HR. And so I had to hire people to take on that work. And absolutely, I've had to turn down work or, shuffle it and give it to some of my staff. But on a major project like this, it's a once in a lifetime project. I really had to make that sacrifice, but it's come with a lot of benefits as well.
Yeah. And so what are they? What are some of those benefits you have from this project?
Well, listen, no matter how long you've worked in the field, there's always something to learn. And by far, I have learned a tremendous amount on this project. And that's really, I think, the thing that I'm most excited about. Every day, I'm dealing with something different. It is very stressful, but I think I'm learning a lot. And I have to say, I'm learning quite a bit about politics, whether I want to or not.
Right.
Yeah, I'm kind of right in the middle of it. And so that's been different. And that's something that I have not had to deal with on other projects.
Right.
But this is a very controversial project.
When you have basically have two sets of politics, right? You have the small scale project specific politics that may be, you can talk to what it's like being a small business with a bunch of big businesses, helping you out. You're the lead, which in itself is a unique situation. But then like you say, there's also a much larger direct political involvement for this project. So can you kind of talk through what makes it controversial and how you manage all of that?
Well, it's definitely been difficult. Like I said, this project or improvements have been needed for decades, right? So this is nothing new to the people that are there. And of course, I think this is common on most major projects. The vocal folks are the ones that don't want it, right?
Right.
You don't hear from the people that support the project.
Right. Yeah.
But we know people support the project. I mean, people are sitting in traffic for 2 hours on a trip that should take 15 minutes. Oh, yeah. It's a quality of life thing. So we know that it definitely is supported, and we are hearing from supporters, but largely, we hear from those people that are opposing it. An issue that we come up with quite a bit is transit versus highway. And that is nothing uncommon. And at least in our case, transit has moved forward. There's a 16-mile light rail project that's actually under construction in this area. And so it's always been our feeling like this need is so great that you need both. It's not one or the other. It's transit, and you need some highway improvements as well. The highway improvements have not moved forward for 30 years. And so now is the time to do it. So, and it's been very controversial, not just with the public, but elected officials as well. And that has been very eye-opening. I deal with, we have really great staff under the program office that can work through those issues. I don't have to directly work through those issues. I'm involved, but I don't have to directly deal with it. But I tend to be the face along with the program director. We give a lot of community presentations. We've probably done well over 200 community presentations.
Wow. Yeah. And it's the area you're in too. It's a very, very engaged public. I used to live up there, so I have a pretty good understanding too when you're talking about traffic. And I think one of the challenges that you have to deal with is traffic's already bad, so who cares if we make it a little bit worse? And I think that's a lot of where that consternation comes from. Have you seen some of that as well?
Absolutely. And I will say, not just an engaged public, but a very educated public.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we're at community meetings, we're dealing with other environmental professionals. We're dealing with, federal agency employees, lawyers. So a very educated public, which is great because they really provide wonderful input, comments that we can take. And really, they've made the project stronger. And that's great. Yeah. That's what this process is supposed to do. But the improvements that you were talking about, we get that quite often. Well, the study's showing that you're only improving travel time by 5 minutes. Why put $3 billion into something when I get 5 minutes? Yeah. And that's actually it's not the case. I mean, travel time, it adds up and annually, and that really translates to dollars too. And so we try to tell people that, but again, I think most people that support it are the ones that are actually sitting in traffic.
Yes.
And there are some people that oppose it that don't sit in the traffic.
Yeah, which is incredible. But you kind of touched on something else there. The logistics of holding all of these. I mean, this is an epic EIS as is, but you held 6 public meetings for this project in the middle of a pandemic, and all of those details, it sounds incredible. You really have some truly innovative ideas that came out of this. So I'd love to hear how you came up with those ideas and what they are, and kind of walking us through that process.
Yeah, so a global pandemic did not stop the fact that we had an accelerated schedule. So we had to maintain the schedule, and it was, there's no guidebook that says, here's a global pandemic. This is what you do on a major NEPA study that has to stay on schedule. So we just kind of had to figure it out on our own. It was a lot of strategy meetings and brainstorming and figuring out innovative ways to keep it going and to make sure that, one, the document was available and accessible as it would if we weren't in a pandemic. But also we had to make sure it was done in a safe way. And as NEPA practitioners, we don't normally have to follow CDC guidelines. Right. A different case. So we actually, one of the innovative ideas, which I thought was amazing, and I don't take credit for this, or really smart consultants that I work with, and they came up with the idea of renting converted C crate containers to house the DEIS. So of course, all the public locations were closed.
Of course,
public libraries are closed, but public libraries are great because they're usually in the middle of a community, right? And they're walkable and they're close to transit stops. So we rented these converted C crate containers, put them in the library parking lots, which we had to get permits to do.
Wow.
There was a little bit of a lip on the containers. So we had to build ADA ramps to each of the containers. There's no bathroom, so we had to rent porta pots.
Oh, wow.
It was in the middle of summer, so we had to rent generators, and we were worried that people were going to steal them. So we had to coordinate with staff every day to go to each location, deliver them, and then pick them up at night. And this lasted for 123 days. We had an extended comment period. Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
I mean, so talk about NEPA nerd stuff. That is as NEPA nerd as it gets. That is so cool. And it's an incredible process. I can't believe that that's how it worked. And you say 123 days. Did you guys plan for that to be that long, or is it just kind of what ended up working out?
Yeah, we did not. We planned for a 60-day public comment period. And based on requests that we got to extend it, we extended it to 120 days. It ended up being 123 days.
Right. Yeah. Which, I guess during a pandemic, you have to be a little flexible. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So the transportation area up there has always been so intensely focused on. Like, everybody cares about it. But I did love the point you made about the public having some real value, them actually providing insight. Very well informed. It's a really amazing area.
Yeah. We've had 200 community meetings. Some of them are huge, and some of them, I'm in somebody's living room with my shoes off because they don't want shoes in the house, and I'm like in front of like 10 citizens, and I'm there until the questions are done. And they are highly educated, very well informed people. And so you're on the hot seat for a while. You must feel like you can do anything. If you can get through the things that, you can pretty much do anything. So,
yeah, that's so funny. And was it? Did you learn anything from it? Like, you had to, were there moments, I guess, really where you were like, oh gosh, I'm really, I have to be really careful here?
Because it's so politically charged at first, that was very stressful for me because I was worried about saying something, right, that was going to be wrong, or, the administration wasn't going to like what I had to say. But you come to the realization that these people live in the area. Their properties are being impacted. You just need to sit back and really listen to what they have to say. So instead of in my head rehearsing what I had to say, I just had to take a step back and be open and, take in what they were telling me, instead of kind of being a little more defensive, which is how I felt early on. And once I did that, I was able to relax much more in these situations. And I think people picked up on that too. That's the one thing I learned, is just to, instead of rehearsing the answer, just sit back and listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. And thank you so much for that, because that's such a cool project, such a really unique situation that you came into. But we love to ask people about their interests outside of the environmental world as well. And we've heard from a few of our guests about their unique music interests. So we have Ed Curtis was on. He's a parrot head. Heather Miller loves metal, which is awesome. And you're a closeted deadhead. Is that right?
I am. Yeah. I know most people look at me and they're like, what? I don't, you don't fit the mold. You're not wearing a tie dye and, smell of patchouli and have like long scraggly hair. But no, I am a closet deadhead. And people don't think this, but I am old enough. I did see the Grateful Dead with Jerry Garcia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have two older sisters, who used to travel around in the late 80s, I'd say mid to late 80s, and they followed them, and a van would pull up and they would, the door would open and my sisters would come out and they had, been to a couple states.
Right.
So
so cool.
I grew up, listening to them and went to my first show. I was 14. I guess my parents thought that was okay because my sisters were there.
Oh, parents.
Yeah. So I love the music. I love the scene, and I continue to see them, even though, of course, Jerry Garcia is no longer here, but of course they continue to play. So
yeah. Dead and company now, right? No longer
Dead and company now.
I mean, how do you think John Mayer's done as their guitarist? I know he's not Jerry Garcia, but I mean, if you had to replace him with somebody, you might as well go with him. Or no?
He's a fantastic guitarist, and so controversial, right? When he started playing, I mean, there were really true deadheads that were like, "We're not going."
Yeah, right.
But I know. They were like boycotting the shows. I think he's proven himself.
Yeah.
And just going to shows, of course, the majority of us are 40 and up, but there are a lot of younger fans that are coming, and I'm sure it's because of John Mayer. My 15-year-old daughter knows of them only because of John Mayer. So,
of course,
but he's a fantastic guitarist. So I think he's done really well.
Right.
And it's amazing that they keep going. Yes, they're old. Yeah, they sound great.
Yeah, and you're totally right. And it's it's what a funny, when it came out, I remember being like, him? John Mayer? Okay, I guess, but they're still going.
Right.
Like he's been there for what, decade? Longer? It's been a while.
Yeah, I think 2016, 2017 is when he started with them.
Wow.
Yeah. So
not as long as I thought. It seems like it's been forever, but so
how many shows have you been to?
Well over 30. Probably, well over 30. I've not counted them all, but I mean, again, I used to see the Grateful Dead, and then they kind of morphed into other things. There were, it was like Rat Dog was Bob Weir's band, and then they did the Further Fest, and then the other ones, they sort of morphed over the years after Jerry passed, and now they're Dead and Company. So I've seen a ton of shows.
Yeah.
So. And I dragged my husband along with me, who's not a Deadhead, but he goes with me.
Torture.
That's true love is what that is. It's true love right there.
Right.
That is some dedication for sure.
Yeah.
So what else do you do when you're not working? Which I'm sure is most of your time, but I know that you like to hike and some other stuff. So how do you keep yourself sane?
I love to hike. And actually, it does keep me sane. Yeah. I mean, there is nothing like being in the middle of the woods by yourself. Everything you need is on your back, and that's it. No one is talking to you, and you don't have to talk to anyone. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful break from the everyday. It's a stress reliever for me, for sure. When I'm feeling really stressed out, I just, hit the trail for a little while. So,
yeah. And you have a favorite hike you like to go on?
Well, I've done section hikes on the Appalachian Trail, and I love the trail. And it's actually really cool. You don't see somebody for miles, and then you see a group and you just kind of like, start talking with them, and you hear about their adventures and you talk about your adventures, and that's really fun. And it's beautiful. And I have to say, Shenandoah is an absolutely gorgeous park, full of black bears, but it's gorgeous.
Other than that. Yeah.
Have you run into some on your hiking?
I have. Yeah. I went when I turned 40. Somebody that works with me, we decided to do 45 miles to celebrate our 40th birthday. And so we did a weekend hike, and we ran into quite a few. And the last one that we ran into, it was a close encounter. I was making mint tea, and in Shenandoah, you have to do backcountry camping. So nobody's around. And black bear came up, just was following the AT and kind of came into our campsite. And I was reading a map, and I stood up, and I guess that startled him, and he waddled away. But yeah, it's the largest population of black bear in the country is in Shenandoah.
Oh my gosh.
If you go hiking, you're bound to run into bears.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's cool and intimidating. I ran into 2 when I was in Alaska last year, but pre-pandemic.
Yeah. No thanks.
So-
That's
Well, it's
that's
good that
wild.
they were black bears and not
Yes.
grizzlies.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Still
Yeah.
though, that's they're still fast.
It's invigorating.
They're still big. Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
just cool to see them in their element, you know. I think I got to sit back and watch one eat berries for a little while. This was really nice.
Yeah,
Awesome.
the woman that I was with thought that I was a complete dork because after I had that encounter, the whole night I had my bear whistle and every acorn that fell, I was like, "That's it, that's it."
Yeah, right.
I blow my whistle.
Oh, that's too funny. Yeah, it's like the hay bear. You know, you make yourself really big.
Yes, lots of hay bears.
Yeah, you can never be cool when you're out there, but that's not the point, right? Yeah, you got to see a bear. It's a great
Right.
story. Yeah, love it.
It is. It's cool.
So we're running out of time, and it's been so great to have you on. And I do want to wish you the best of luck with your project. I guess, where are you on it? Like, is it almost? Are you halfway? Are you almost done? What is the?
Yeah, we are almost done. We are hoping that June of next year will be the FEIS rod.
Awesome.
So
That's great.
Cool. Well, good luck with that. So if people want to get in
Thank
touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
best way is to send an email to me. It is my first name, and it's Caryn at blackwaterinvironmentalgroup.com. And I would welcome people to check out our webpage too, which is blackwaterinvironmentalgroup.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for this opportunity. It's been great.
That's our show. Thanks, Caryn, for joining us today. We super enjoyed having you on. This episode is sponsored by Blackwater Environmental Group. You can check them out at www.blackwaterinvironmentalgroup.com. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.